All right, you have 4:07 and you are live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Board of Examining Plumbers. It's January 3rd, 2022, 4:07 p.m. Special meeting regarding the exam results from a recent plumbing exam. Steve, may I turn that over to you?
Yes, we do. So we administered a plumbing exam on what date was that, Carrie?
December 23rd.
December 23rd. We had 3 individuals sit the exam. The applicant for licensure, Gregory Gassotti, scored a 92 on the exam, which exceeds the minimum score for licensing. So I guess I'm putting forward to the board that we approve the results of the exam. And I don't know, what's the official, is there an official way to say that, Carrie?
You just have to approve the results.
Approve the results of the plumbing exam.
So the question, Steve, the other 2 who took the exam, would they be allowed to license in the future if they chose to?
So I guess their interest is being put as journeymen because they're going to work. They're like, we're foreman on the job and we just are looking to basically work on the project. I would say that we'd make them reapply. I mean, at this point, I don't see, if they're not going to apply for a license, then, you know, we update the test. I mean, anytime there's a code update, anytime there's changes, I try to update it between exams so that we're not giving the same exam every time, just to make sure that there's no opportunity for someone to, take a picture of the questions or somehow. So, I mean, I would say that at this point, my interest would be in licensing the individual that's requesting licensing. And if the other 2 aren't interested in becoming licensed, then they'll just have to redo the process.
So just for clarification, their process would start over again if they chose to proceed.
I think that is a good precedent to set, because right now there's only one individual in that group requesting licensure. We issued a test for the license. If they're not interested in receiving a license, then I don't see why in the future we would automatically give them a license just because they've sat the exam, 5 years ago or something.
I would agree with that. Mike,
I mean, it seems like it's an application, like if I put in an application for a driver's license and then I'd never show up or I opt not to complete it, I mean, I can't just come back 15 years later and say I want my driver's license. I mean,
should that be something that's on the paperwork that there's 30 days or whatever, or something like that? So it's written out.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we could add to the licensing process. I mean,
that if you don't follow through in a certain amount of time, that this is void and you'll have to start over again.
So I guess my question, Carrie, is do we already have anything like that for other? I know for like zoning and planning stuff, we have, the application's good for 30 days. The application's good for, so I mean, that's something we could just say, like plumbing and electrical licensing applications are good for, 30 days pending, the plumbing board giving it an extension, or.
We'd have to write that into the code.
Right.
But we can certainly do that. On a side note, the requirements for journeymen, if they don't provide certain information, they require that journeymen be approved by the Board of Examining Plumbers. So I would ask the board to consider approving them as journeymen, seeing as they passed the master, just for our licensing process.
I think that makes sense.
Great. I was just back to the other part of the conversation regarding period of time within which they need to apply for their license after passing the exam. Is there any logic to making it, the same calendar year in which the exam was given, or within a year or something like that, where you're required to re-up your license every year, right?
Right.
So maybe it should mirror that.
Yeah, like annually. I mean, I think I think it makes sense to put some sort of limitation on it if we're going to be, we don't want someone to sit an exam and then come back 5 years from now and say, hey, I'm ready for my license. So yeah, I think that's reasonable.
So as the calendar year, should we do that?
Maybe make
or-
it 1 year from the date of the exam you have to actually apply and get the license. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know if we want to go out that far. I think the date has to be tied to the date of the exam. So if they're going to take the exam and pass, I would think they'd want to get their license within a 3 to 6 month period. If they could exam and then say, I'm going to wait to the next calendar year, rather than getting their license to avoid a license fee for the year that they took the exam.
Right, it would be up to their personal situation. For some reason, if they want to delay getting the licensure, they're not going to be able to do any work, obviously. So I'm comfortable with a shorter period. What would you suggest, Jeff? 3 or 6 months?
I'm good with 6 months.
Okay. I mean, we can draft that up and we can add it to the legislative, as an amendment to the code.
Yeah.
With some type of a deadline, I agree, it doesn't allow it to linger. And that could come back at some date in the future. Let's just avoid that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we need a motion for that? Okay, I'd like to make it. Steve?
I wouldn't think we would need a motion for me to draft something, because really the people that would have to pass that would be the legislative committee. That's just like a legislative action. Like I can draft up legislation pretty much whenever I want. It's just putting it in front of the committee. And I don't know. What do you think, Greg?
I agree. I don't think we need a motion. We can just take that on. Our next meeting's on January 10th. We could potentially, if not by then, by the next meeting, which would be the first week in February, bring that up to the legislative committee.
Yeah.
Carrie, are you comfortable with that?
I'd like to see a motion by the board. Not to be like the only dissenter, but just to have something so when it goes to legislative, we can say, hey, the plumbing board reviewed this, they support it, and we're moving it forward with their recommendation.
Okay.
Okay.
So a motion creates no harm or foul, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that an applicant who passes the plumbing exam will be required to obtain their license within a 6-month period from the date of the exam, or they void the opportunity. Or is there a better word, folks?
I'll second that.
So I guess we do a roll, Carrie?
Are you ready for roll? Chair Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Rinkevich,
Yes.
Code Enforcement Officer Yearly,
Yes.
City Administrator Mattice.
Yes.
What else do we need to talk about other than the exam?
If I could get a motion for approval of the exam, just to formalize that, the approval of the exam results.
And the date on that was 12/23, correct?
Correct.
Make a motion to accept the exam results for the plumbing exam given on 12/23, master plumber exam.
I'll second.
Chair Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Rinkevich,
Yes.
Code Enforcement Officer Yearly,
Yes.
City Administrator Mattice.
Yes.
Passes.
Do we want to make an additional motion to approve the other 3 as journeymen?
Yes, go ahead and make the motion.
I'd make the motion that the tests, Charles Purcell and is it Joe Gassotti?
Yes.
be approved as journeyman under Gregory Gassati's license.
I'll second that.
Chair Back,
Yes.
Commissioner Rinkevich,
Yes.
Code Enforcement Officer Yearly,
Yes.
City Administrator Mattice.
Yes.
Passes. Thank you.
So we have one more conversation about being able to take the exam via Zoom.
So Greg, I brought up the idea before the meeting started that Seth has wanted to take the test. He asked me about doing it this weekend. I thought one option might be, and it's something we can kind of test out, is setting up essentially like a Zoom meeting and then proctoring the exam via Zoom.
In the council chambers.
Yeah, either having him sit in the council chamber and just observing him through that, or just honestly like just a Zoom meeting that I could just watch him while he sits and takes the test.
Okay. Obviously, it's an open book exam. They would be expected to bring codes with them. So
Right.
Looking them up online is what's the difference?
Well, I mean, I would argue that like if we, if there's no computer or phone access, I mean, if you're watching someone take the exam via Zoom, well, I guess in theory they could look up. I didn't think about that. That's actually that's a good point, Greg.
If they're on their computer, they'll be able to look up anything up.
Right, they'd be able to look up.
Email somebody. Yeah, I mean, looking things up isn't a big issue if they're able to bring materials with them, but obviously communicating with anyone other than you would not be good.
Right.
I thought you meant,
Right,
if you weren't
council
here or
chambers, yeah.
Proctor wasn't here, you could proctor it remotely. They'd still have to be physically present at City Hall, and we just watch them
Through the right.
camera. I would see no problem with that.
Right.
But I
Okay,
would
so that
still
makes
require them
that
to
makes sense.
physically be present.
Okay. Yeah, I guess how do we watch? I mean, is that something that like Carrie that I could gain access to?
Yeah,
Or is there
I
a
mean,
way to,
it's a remote desktop similar to the Log Me In,
okay.
but he would need access to the building. Someone would have to be here to let him in and stay with him.
Right. Okay. Well, you know what? I'll be in contact with Seth. I'll kind of know more once I get my test results back. Yeah. I didn't think about the computer access via Zoom because I thought that was a genius plan.
This is a viable idea, but I think it needs some more conversation and thought.
Right.
How we would implement it.
Right.
So maybe we can talk about that during the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I'll be in touch with Seth once I know kind of where I'm at this week.
Okay. Anything else we have to discuss?
I have no other business for you. You are currently scheduled for your organizational meeting on the 27th of January, unless being as this was a properly noticed meeting, you wanted to handle those agenda items now and forego your meeting on the 27th. That's at your discretion.
I'm okay with that. So for our organization, we have a vote for the chair for 2022. Greg and Steve would not be candidates because they're city employees. So it's down to myself and Mike and an absentee chair.
Yeah.
Can an absentee chair be a chair?
No.
No. Mike, your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I'm not really able to take that role on at this point.
So I guess that leaves one person. And my term expires the end of 2022. That's correct, Carrie?
Correct. It's January 14th of 23. We always extend them into 23 to allow for a council meeting.
Okay. Would someone
So
like,
now that, if that's the case, then you can't sit on the board at all?
no, I have to leave, I believe. Is that true?
If you're termed out, then yeah. Would this be your third? Let's take a peek. Yeah, January 14, 2023, you are termed out. You would have to take a year off.
Okay,
So what happens if we can't find any more people?
Right now, you have the ability with 3 members to take action. So it would be you and the 2 city representatives, pending
Okay.
fulfilling the current vacancy and the new vacancy.
and that would also force you to be the chair, Mike.
What's that?
That would also force you to be the chair.
Would force me to be the chair.
In 23,
No.
correct?
Well, we'll see what happens when 23 gets here.
Okay. So
That's all I can say.
let's move forward with it then. A motion will need to be made.
Make a motion to appoint Jeff back as the chair.
I'll second it.
Vote,
Chair back. Oop. Chair back.
abstain.
Commissioner Rinkevich,
Yes.
Code Enforcement Officer Yearly,
Yes.
and City Administrator Matthijs.
Yes.
Passes. And then your final action item would be meeting schedule for 22, unless you want it as a similar structure as 21.
Open for discussion. Personally, I would like to see it the same structure as 21, as an as needed. I think we're more effective that way. Comments?
I agree with that.
I agree.
Yes, that works.
So is that something that you handle, Carrie, or do we need a motion for that?
Nope, I can set it by acclamation.
Okay. So we no longer need a meeting for January unless the need arises?
Correct?
Is that all the topics that we need to discuss at this meeting?
That's all that I have.
I would consider the meeting adjourned then.
I'll second that.